Trans women in the UK are no longer legally women. On April 16th, the UK Supreme Court ruled that the terms woman and sex in the Equality Act 2010 refer exclusively to biological sex. The case was brought by for Women Scotland, challenging the inclusion of trans women with gender recognition certificates in female quotas for public boards. The ruling means trans women aren't legally considered women under this law, which affects their access to female spaces, like hospital wards and rape crisis centers.
If this is a victory, what or who is it a victory for?
Women's rights, just all the women that have been discriminated against at work, the Darlington nurses, for example, who just want to get changed in their own space just for their biological sex and not share it with a man who declares that he's a woman despite having all of the male biological characteristics intact.
Who has lost?
Nobody. Trans rights are still protected in the Equality Act as they should be. Trans rights are still the same as every other human's rights, but women in the workplace now have that backup, and employers should be assured that we will fight if we're discriminated against. A certificate doesn't mean that you've changed to being biologically female or male.
Trans people in general are still protected from discrimination under the Equality Act through the characteristics of gender reassignment. So from what I understand, this ruling means that the UK now finally defines what a woman is, protects women's spaces and rights without removing trans people's right to exist, to transition, and to be protected from discrimination. I think it sounds amazing, like it's a win-win. We're finally seeing some pushback against radical trans ideology, and it's without harming real transsexuals. However, as you can imagine, trans activists are pissed.
You will not erase us. This week, the Supreme Court ruled against us, and the Labour Party backed them. And that betrayal will not be forgotten, because they promised dignity and we believed them. They said they'd reform the GRA, and we trusted them. And now when we needed them most, they turned their backs on us. We do not stand still. We marched. Because this fight isn't over, it is just the beginning.
Fucking business. Where I do my business is none of your business.
Where I do my business is none of your business.
Where we do our business is none of your business. Where we do our business is none of your fucking business.
Where I do my business is none of your business.
Our biological sex does not decide what toilets we use, our brain does.
But what's interesting is how it's not only the creepy men with cheap wigs and the young girls with blue hair and septum piercings who are angry about this ruling. Even trans people who've fully transitioned and don't fit the stereotype of a crazy activist are upset. Alexis Blake is one of those trans people. Alexis is a trans woman on YouTube who over the past couple of years has criticized parts of trans ideology and tried to position herself in the middle ground. Here's her take on this new ruling.
I'm sick of being blamed for men's behaviour time and time again. A man doesn't have to put on a dress and a wig to go into a woman's space and do something bad. They can do it anyway.
That's true, but the difference now is that men can no longer legally get away with it. Before, creepy men could pretend to be trans women and legally get access to women's spaces. Now they can't. So what exactly is the problem with that? Alexis, by your logic, since people can break any law, we shouldn't have laws at all. You say you're tired of being blamed for men's shitty behavior, but honestly, you should be. When you make reaction videos on your YouTube channel about these unhinged trans activists, you still affirm them as trans. Remember?
From like the side by side, like she turned her head in the video and you can see her brow bone had a bump before and now it's a little bit softer. She has been accused of mocking women, playing women face, insulting biological women, being narcissistic, misogynistic, all the different insults, and it's a lot of insults. She hasn't learnt from that.
You use she, her pronouns for men like Dylan Mulvaney and Lily Tino. By embracing these frauds and validating harmful activists as trans, you've helped blur the lines. And that's exactly what led to this backlash. And before I forget, just a couple of months ago, you called my content brutal.
We have another video from Marcus to react to. Marcus is quite brutal. I've seen some of his videos. I'm sometimes left speechless, so let's watch a little bit of what he has to say.
All I do is make a clear distinction between real transsexuals and the frauds, and that leaves you speechless. Wow. Honestly, I was surprised watching this clip. I did not expect you to have that opinion about me. I thought you were a part of the rational transsexual community, the very small community on YouTube, but apparently I was wrong. Alexis, I don't know if you know this, but in the name of being very nuanced, tolerant, and open-minded, you've legitimized the very people who are responsible for this mess.
If you don't know what goes into transition, it's not just a switch that we flip. I had to be legally diagnosed with gender dysphoria. I had to go through a psychological evaluation. I have had 8 surgeries. I had to prove myself time and time again to get my gender recognition certificate, which I got earlier on this year. To now be told that I'm not legally recognised as a woman. I get married this summer. Sorry to make it about me, but I get married this summer. And I don't know if that means I'm getting legally married as a man or a woman, which really sucks.
Why does it matter? You're still getting married as Alexis and as someone who looks like a woman? Or are you saying that if you'd known that you wouldn't be legally recognized as a woman, you wouldn't have transitioned? I mean, what's the goal of your transition to alleviate your gender dysphoria? Or do you actually believe that you're a woman? Because that is what it's starting to sound like.
Also, something else I want to point out, they want us to use the toilets that align with our biological sex. So trans men, women who transition to men, look very much like men. Beards, you would never know. So that means they should then use the women's toilet, which means men can just walk in and say, I'm a trans man, I was born a woman, I should have been here. It's not making anyone safer.
It sounds like you're just derailing the conversation, bringing up these weird hypotheticals instead of addressing what actually caused all of this in the first place. Not once in your video have you condemned the frauds in our community that the ruling is all about.
Going to put more women and girls in danger. It's going to put trans people in danger. This is not the end. It's just the start of what they're trying to do. It is discrimination. I understand some of the trans community haven't helped the situation. Fuel has been added to the fire by them. If you take anything away from this video, it's that this isn't benefiting women. It's not making women safer or girls safer. It's going to make them more prone to judgment and criticism from strangers, because if you don't look like what someone thinks a woman should be, you're going to get challenged on that. That's what this ultimately means for women.
So creepy men who self-identify as trans women should be allowed in women's spaces because some women might look like trans women. How does that make sense? I think most people in society can tell the difference between a masculine woman and a man trying to look like a woman. Maybe I'm wrong. I mean, sometimes people get it wrong, but again, what does that have anything to do with the law? And look, trans activists didn't just add fuel to the fire, they started the goddamn fire. This entire mess started when activists pushed the idea that anyone who claims to be a woman is a woman. And also the idea of, you don't need gender dysphoria to be trans, anyone who claims to be trans is trans. Like a trans woman who fully transitioned and no one knows that she's trans is the exact same as a man with a big dad bod and a full-size beard claiming to be a woman. And that is a narrative that you haven't been able to consistently shut down.
I'm lucky that I can go out into the world undetected. Not all trans women have the finances and opportunity to make that a possibility, and some genetics don't make that a possibility. I'm lucky and I understand that, but not all trans women are. A fire has been lit in me by this blatant discrimination against trans women. This really sucks.
And what is a trans woman, Alexis? Can you give me a clear definition? Again, because when you call Dylan Mulvaney she, and you want people to call you she, you're implying that you're the same as Dylan. That you're both trans women. And I don't agree with that. Dylan Mulvaney is not a trans woman. Doesn't deal with gender dysphoria. But apparently that's brutal to say, so maybe I should stop. When you think about it, it's not possible for you to know if this whole thing is discrimination against trans women if you can't define what a trans woman is. Look, I really wanted to like Alexis, because she has said a lot of smart things on her channel. But it seems like the minute she thinks something will affect her personally, she's changing her beliefs entirely. Her beliefs, her opinions about trans discourse, and I think that's a huge red flag. I'm being 100% honest when I say, if my legal sex change got revoked tomorrow, I would still be legally Marcus, but legally a woman, I wouldn't give a shit. I would totally understand. Maybe it will be a little bit inconvenient for me from time to time, but I don't care. And if I one day was forced to use the women's restroom, I don't think I would complain that much about it. I highly doubt it will ever happen because the conversation is not about trans men. It's about trans women. Why? Because trans women are men, are physically stronger, are capable of doing a lot of harm to women in their spaces, in women's spaces. And trans men are women. And just because we're on testosterone doesn't mean that we're a huge threat to women. If the laws suddenly were to change in my country about what trans people can do and all this stuff, my first reaction would be, why did this happen? Honestly, I would not think about myself. Because laws changing is not just about me. Other people in society exist. And I'm not saying it just because it sounds good and I sound like a good person for thinking about others, but I truly mean it. Just like when I think about who to vote for, I don't think about what will benefit me personally the most. I think about society as a whole. I think that's what most people do. Moving on, here's another example of a trans woman who's not excited about this ruling.
I think there's a lot that's been said that there's not clarity, there's not, we're not sure exactly what is going to happen in terms of passports, toilets, gym change rooms. There's so many things logistically that need to be discussed. And then to have the headline that the definition of a woman is biological sex makes me feel, and trans people feel, as though we're defined as a man. I'm essentially a man in a lot of people's eyes, and legally, potentially now on paper, I could be. And that's scary.
Babe, it's not just about what's on paper. Factually, biologically, you are a man. What's funny is your legal documents don't define your gender. Wow, that sounded so woke. But what I mean is you can legally be female even though you're a man. You can change your legal sex, but you can still not change your biological sex and reality. There's absolutely nothing scary about stating biological truth. And there's nothing scary about what's happening right now in the UK. What was scary, though, is how creepy men had access, unlimited access, to women's spaces. And anyone who spoke out against it was immediately labeled a transphobe, a bigot, a TERF, if not a Nazi.
I will still continue to use a female toilet. I still see myself as a woman and always will. Whether this legislation comes in and people agree with it or not, I still see myself as a woman, whether it's on paper or not.
And there it is, the whole me mindset. Instead of making this all about you and how it could maybe negatively affect you, why not call out the ones who are faking your experience for harmful and predatory reasons? Why is it so hard? I do it all the time. I think it's the most easy thing ever, but okay.
I'm all for protecting women and their rights. I'm not here to take away anybody's rights. I just want to acknowledge that I am an equal and I also have rights. And women have fought so many years for being able to vote and so many other rules and legislations that it now feels like they're turning that on us and we now have to deal with that struggle. And it's like women have had to fight for so long and now you're happy to watch us and celebrate and drink champagne at this ruling, knowing that we have to now go through that struggle.
Oh, the virtue signaling. The only reason why you're scared and you're upset is because finally something might affect you. You didn't do shit when all this affected women and children. Before, when things were affecting women and girls, children, you didn't care. That mindset literally boils my blood. As long as things are not affecting me, I don't care. Where were you when people from your community, people you represent, were doing harmful things to women and children? Where were you? If you have been vocal about it, just like I have, been so clearly against it, different story. But I'm assuming you haven't. So now, you just have to deal with the consequences. And also, what are you talking about? You're an equal. No, you're not. Equal means the same, and you're not the same as a woman. You're something different. So, women's rights, females' rights, have nothing to do with you. Stop pretending they have. Okay, I have so much more to say. I think I'm gonna save a lot of my thoughts for another video. I hope you don't mind. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to see more content like this, remember to hit subscribe and the notification bell. As always, please let me know what you think, and I cannot wait to read your comments down below. Peace out.